Hey, how's it going there, folks? Welcome back here to a Friday. It is the Earthmaster out here. And what is it? About 11 o'clock a.m. California time, June 28th, 2024. Latest activity here on the Earthquake 3D globe shows a 1.6 into the California area, also a 1.2. 1.6 up in Washington, 1.2 down in SoCal. We'll get to the earthquake activity here in a little bit. I did have an unexpected G4 class storm kick up last night, or actually early this morning, I should say. Last night, looked like we were starting to peak up a little bit here in the KP index at 4 to 5, and man, I thought that was it, but boy, was I wrong. We had a unexpected event take place last night, early this morning, I should say, and KP index went way up into the looks like the 8 category just about. I was woken up here early this morning by my solar weather alert alerting me to a G4 class storm, and I was like, what is going on? Of course, by then it was already light out here in California and the rest of the North American side of the world. But for the folks that did have some dark skies out here across this area of the world, I'm sure they had a nice little treat of aurora display across that area. Again, had the KP index up there, very close to the G5 class storm category. Now, this was all from a CME that was forecasted here. Let me bring up the electrical power board here, and this is a forecast that got put out a couple days ago. Here is the expected arrival of the CME. Now, we weren't really expecting much. If you look here, the brunt of that plasma was way off here to it would be our west on the Earth-Sun solar plane here. But we got a decent amount of plasma. Look at that. There's the CME that blasted off. Here's the one of the leading edges. And just barely glimpsed the planet. But it wasn't really forecasted much. They said maybe up to a G1 class storm, but the reasoning behind the reason why we saw so much elevated activity was at a time when the BZ component here of the interplanetary magnetic field is pointing south and wide open. Look at this right here. This is what we had seen last was it last month already now? In May. During those historic aurora events there. We've seen auroras down to extremely historic low latitudes there, including here in Northern California, Southern California as well. And when this is open like that, that allows and pretty much amplifies any type of solar wind stream or CME activity that's headed this way, or that's about ready to hit the planet here, or as it hits a planet, there we go, to be amplified. And it stayed open here for quite a while, at least pointing south, and that allowed those G4 class storming conditions observed this morning to remain for a little extended period. Since then, we have tightened up pretty nicely with a northward tilt of that BZ component, indicating that things have cooled off, so to speak, here with the auroras. Doesn't look like there's too much activity right now stirring up, and I don't think we're going to see this again tonight, far as that activity that stirred up this morning with the G4 class storm. Let me get rid of this real quick and bring up the, see, that's what we observed, G4 class storm. Now, last month was the G5. So we've seen a G5 class storm, and that BZ component was pointing way south as well. That's why we've seen the major historic aurora events like we seen last month there, but I don't think we're going to see this tonight. Everything looks like it's closed up. BZ North, the CME has passed us. We may see a little bit of auroras at the higher latitudes, but honestly, that is just, it was unexpected to say the least here. I don't think a lot of people were expecting that, but it happened. When things are timed right, we can see a nice aurora display for sure. Things have to be specifically lined up, though. Had that been, a couple different CMEs directed majorly at Earth, Earth directed completely, then we'd be talking about maybe a repeat of what we had seen last month with the auroras. But, yeah, pretty crazy. Either way, I got to make sure I change my settings here not to be disturbed so early in the morning there. Can't remember exactly what time it went off, but yeah, I got a space weather event notification let me know that there was a remarkable G4 class storm that was kicking up. Pretty crazy. All right, so tonight, maybe we could see some unsettled conditions here in terms of the auroras. This was the, I believe, the original forecast here for tonight. KP index up around a 4, it looks like. Is this for tonight's? Let's see here. I believe it is. If we click on it, we can see tonight's. Yep, it's integrated there into the solar ham site. And I don't know if this is going to play out tonight because we already seen the CME, the brunt of it, kick up. And who knows? May see a little unsettled conditions. I don't think it's going to be this amplified, but we'll see what happens later tonight. Here would be the view line across some of the northern tier states. Here's tomorrow's, but I think, with the early arrival of that CME and the timing and whatnot, this probably won't transpire. This probably will not come to play. It's already done, already passed. There's a G4 class storm here. This has predicted KP index, but I think this is more observed. Let me see what we got for our current KP index here real quick. So we're still at about a 5 or so, maybe some less on the other stations, but as you can see, the real-time solar wind stream there is tight. Indicate that BZ component is way north, and that's going to suppress any of this extended aurora events here. So as long as it stays like that, I don't think we're going to see any auroras kicking up. It'd have to open back up, point south, to really kick up the auroras, and I just don't see that happening right now. Southern hemisphere pretty quiet as well, so we'll watch it. If anything does kick up, then we'll probably provide a little bit more updates later tonight once it gets dark and whatnot. But the timing of this came in a little off. Let's see. It came off for us anyway in terms of being able to see the auroras because it was already light out here. All right, anyway, far as forecasting goes with flares on the sun from these sunspots, well, let's take a look and see what we have here on this beautiful Friday. Not really impressed at any of these areas right now. They're all fairly stable. Disorganized sunspot 3723 here. Looks like it's starting to completely dwindle out. There's still one little separate core here that I'm watching. There's a little bit of close proximity, different colors here that may spark off an upper C, maybe a low-grade M flare from that. Not a whole lot of other sunspots out there on the eastern limb that we have to look forward to. So we may be entering into a little quiet period of space weather activity. Yeah, you can see here, Kevin's got it listed on the map when the CME hit us at the perfect time when that BZ component was pointing south. Things got elevated with the density. The speed really kicked up, and really not all that impressive. Speed only up around the 450, maybe to 500. Last month during the aurora, historic aurora events, we had them up around 800-900 or so with elevated density and whatnot. So it's all about this, the BZ component. If this is pointing south here, that allows the amplification there of the auroras. All right, yeah, so nothing major for flaring activity. There's still 99% chance for C flare, M flare 50, X flare around 5% chance or so, and we're really not expecting any X flare activity. We're just crackling a little bit here with C flare activity, and as you can see, really no M flare activity at all in the last couple days. And it should stay that way. All right, earthquake activity. Did have some big-time earthquake activity prior to all this activity last night, or prior to all the space weather activity that took place this morning. We had a 7.2 down here in Peru. This got upgraded Originally came in as a 6.4 on the EMSC model. USGS reported it as a 7.0. Thought it was going to stay that way, but it looks like they revised this up to a 7.2. So that's a decent earthquake. We haven't seen a 7-pointer in a little while, right? Trying to think when the last 7-pointer was out here. Let's see what we got. I want to go 6.5 and above. Since I'll go January 1st. Okay, just take a look here and see on the world, and there we go. So our last 7-pointer was actually back in April of this year, 7.4 in the Taiwan area. That's, of course, they've seen that sequence of large aftershock activity as well that lasted for a couple months and then just died off all of a sudden. But yeah, that was the last 7-pointer back in April. So far we've had 1, 2, 3, 4 7-pointers this year, and it's actually very common. We should be seeing an 8-pointer at some point this year. It's been a little while since we've seen an 8-pointer. We at least get one. Seems like at least every 2 years, and I think the last 8-pointer was the Kermadec Trench, I believe. We'll have to look at that a little bit later, but yeah, so things kicking up. Obviously, we've seen a lot of plate movement, adjustment going on yesterday with the Pacific Plate. Let's see what we got for aftershock activity. Couple 4s in there. I'm sure there's a little bit more than just a couple 4s stirring up in that region. Yeah, there's quite a bit. Well, yeah, it looks like there's quite a few 4s in this mix of activity from the EMSC, and that's expected there. If we start seeing a bunch more 6s and maybe some more 7s, and we would probably be talking about maybe something bigger hitting this area soon, but I'm not seeing it. It would show up, almost hours following the main quake, and I just don't think we're leaning towards anything bigger there for now. 28 kilometers deep for that earthquake, 7.2, shaking things up there around the Peru area, but these guys are no strangers to big earthquakes. They get hit with a lot of large earthquakes out here. I was just surprised it took so long. The South America region is normally hit with quite a few 6s and 7s quite often. This area is a major subduction zone along the South America area, and the accumulated slip rate is quite high in areas out here along the Peru-Chile Trench. Doesn't take hundreds of years to build up strain for big earthquakes. It's just been a little while, though. South America has just been popping with a bunch of 3s and 4s in the deeper regions of the trench, so that's probably a leading indicator as to why we've seen further surface adjustment going on here in the larger scale department upstream. I did have some activity over here across the Kermadec Trench this morning, some adjustment going on following all this activity last night. Working its way south here. It looks, well, let's see here. It's 5.7, fairly shallow around Tonga. The latest one, a 4.6, fairly shallow here along the southern end of the Kermadec Trench. As far as New Zealand goes, got to watch this down here because I have a feeling it seems like the larger scale movement is stopping right here around North Island, New Zealand. Occasionally we'll see a 3 here, a 3 there, bunch of deep earthquakes underneath North Island. Well, I think that adjustment's going to take place here pretty soon across the New Zealand area. Seismic gap going on here across Papua New Guinea, Solomon Islands, Vanuatu for now. We are noticing some adjustment, and that transfer of pressure across the plate boundary up here across the Andaman Sea, 5.0 coming in right now within the last hour. 10 kilometers deep. Also, I've seen something pop up over here recently. It looks like some activity in the Philippines. Pacific Plate yesterday was quite active. Goodness, we had movement all over the place out here. And it's still actually fairly decently active today. So it's during these times that we got to watch what's going on out here in the middle of the plate, right? That's Hawaii, sitting over the hot spot. Well, Hawaii is the hot spot. Right, the Pacific Plate moves accordingly to the northwest, and these islands get formed over time. Eventually, we'll have further newer islands out here in this direction as the Pacific Plate moves to the northwest. You can see the old Hawaii islands out here that have been eroded over time. And let's see what we got for earthquake activity. I noticed last night this thing was kicking up. Looks like we're still kicking up a little bit, more so in the last hour or so, leading up towards the summit region. Now let's go take a look here at the latest volcano hazard map from the USGS. And this update was put out today. Let's see what they're stating here about this earthquake swarm. A brief earthquake swarm occurred southeast of the summit yesterday afternoon, but no associated volcanic changes were detected. Any substantial increases in seismicity and or deformation could result in a new eruptive episode within or near the summit region. But right now there are no signs of an imminent eruption at this time. There were, looks like 170 earthquakes being reported in that earthquake swarm beneath the summit upper east rift zone there in the last 24 hours, occurring roughly about 1 to 1.8 miles below the surface. Things are getting real, that's for sure. Rates of ground deformation. Let's go check this out here and see what we got. We've been elevated. Just because we've gone down maybe a little bit here overnight doesn't mean anything. This is a very minimal amount on the long-term graphs here. By the way, here's the eruption that happened on the 2nd or 3rd of June, Southwest Rift Zone. Remember, we had a fissure event take place over there. 10-hour-long eruption, spewed out a little bit of lava. That only did a small amount to the inflation chart. Maybe about a week's worth of inflation was lost there. Maybe. At least on the chart. And look what we've been doing since then. Up and up and up and up and up. And we're at our highest level here of inflation since 2018. Here's 2019. Here's a couple periodic eruptions here. Notice that little droppage. Hasn't done anything. So we got a lot to deal with here. There's still, these are in meters, by the way. There's a lot to look forward to here. I think across the Kilauea volcano and these rift zones. And I'm leaning towards, just been watching these earthquake swarms kick up here, and they've been consistent within this area. Now remember, earlier this month, before the eruption, we were having a little bit more earthquake activity over here. The eruptive event took place down here across the old 1974 vents and cracked open a little bit. But I believe the area has solidified underneath the surface, creating a band-aid over this area, I believe. And I think we're just leaning, I'm kind of making an assumption here that we're going to see further activity escalate across this region here. Either a fissure event take place out here. I'm 50-50 on the summit right now. I should say I'm leaning more towards activity out here instead of the summit region or the crater area up here. Upper east rift zone, or potentially we could see some type of magma displacement or intrusion out here across the east rift zone. Maybe even south potentially. I've noticed quite a bit of swarming going on here across this area. Deeper areas, of course, that's normal, but we have been seeing some surface adjustment take place, leading out towards the Loihi Seamount, which is eventually going to be a bigger island over time. So all this has to take place below and up through the surface to create these new islands over time, and we're witnessing it in very slow motion. Right here, our little ants, or our little human ant life, I guess, compared to long-term geology lifespan. We're witnessing this in slow motion, and it's intriguing to say the least here. So we'll watch and see what happens here. Either way, elevated earthquake activity. They showed 174 earthquakes in the last 24 hours. Obviously, they're only pointing out a little bit here on the map, right? So they're not really reporting all the earthquakes. Let me go over here and check out the seismograph stations. I forgot to do that while I was over here. And we are going to look at the area of interest here. This seismograph station right here should be good. Man, look at those S waves here. See those thick wavy lines? That's the S waves from the 7.2 there in the Peru area last night. Goodness. And I think some of those, those vibrations, those frequency vibrations that take place with these large earthquakes and travel around the globe, sometimes multiple times, can trigger events. We've seen it quite a few years back when Alaska had a decent earthquake activity up there, and it triggered an earthquake swarm in Yellowstone. In fact, the USGS noted that. They recognized that and made a statement on that. I can't remember exactly where it was at. It's been a few years. I'll have to go back and find that. But, these large earthquakes send out a massive vibration, so to speak, across the earth, and through it, these surface waves here, I think, can trigger earthquake activity. It didn't trigger the swarm, obviously, in Hawaii, but it can trigger earthquake activity out there around the globe. Just a little bit, I think. Either way, the swarm here has been kicking up across the Kilauea volcano prior to that big earthquake. So nothing new. Doesn't look like it's affected it much, but still seeing earthquake activity out here. Definitely want to watch the Kilauea volcano here, folks. Things are getting heightened. I've been saying that every day, but it's high. It's definitely quite heightened out here. All right, let's go back here and check out California. Anything adjusting here across California? Well, it looks like Cascadia up here. Well, these are surface quakes. 5 o'clock, 6 o'clock this morning for a pair of 1.8s across this area. Excuse me, got hiccups all of a sudden. Northern California, fairly quiet in terms of larger scale movement. A couple smaller earthquakes here on the Calaveras Fault Zone and the San Andreas Fault here. They're pinnacles. A couple low-grade ones. Nothing going on across the Long Valley supervolcano there in California for now. Yes, we have our own supervolcano. Southern California, what we got here? A little bit of very small microquake activity from yesterday and today. There across this area of the Red Mountain. Well, there's quite a few fault systems here that run in that area. Los Angeles area looks fairly quiet. The extreme Southern California region, no major swarms going on here. Just typical movement here across various faults in Southern California. So just an average day, it looks like, here across Southern and Northern California. Mount St. Helens still seeing some earthquake activity. We checked this out last night. There's a handful of earthquakes that we've seen on the map. Does look like they may be reported, or it does look like they reported a couple of these smaller quakes there around the area. But on the graph, we've seen a little bit more than just a couple. Some smaller earthquake activity into the Seattle area. Yellowstone National Park, not seeing anything on there, but I'm sure that S wave from that big earthquake showed up. There's the wind events from yesterday and late last night. There's a 7-pointer in Peru that showed up fairly nicely, but I noticed the surface adjustment waves are not really showing up here. On the big ones, the 8s and the 9-pointers, goodness, it does that to pretty much all the seismograph stations around the globe. But this right here just tells me that the majority of these seismograph stations here are working properly out here. Because if you have some stations that look like borehole, well, that one picked it up just barely. This one, I don't think it picked it up at all. It picked up some of the surface waves, it looks like, but not the P wave. Pelican Cove, I'm not for sure what's up with that. That one's, the sensitivity on this is turned way down. Same with Mirror Lake Plateau. Either way, it's kind of neat to see a large earthquake signature on a very distant station, thousands of miles away. Doesn't look like it's done anything to Yellowstone, though. No earthquake activity that I can see across the area. All right, further out and about here across the rest of the states, Oklahoma, Texas, even one earthquake up in Kansas outside of the Salina region, 2.6. Smolan, is that right? Hopefully. I don't want to get that wrong because maybe one day this may be my home state area. Northward, maybe. Kansas northward. Oklahoma, Texas, I love it down there, but I want to live somewhere where we get some cold winters. Yes, I'm crazy like that. I like to experience all 4 seasons. That's what we're here on this planet for, so we can experience the seasons and everything else. A couple twos down here across Puerto Rico. The Alaska area doesn't look like we've seen anything major overnight. That was from yesterday, 4.9. Things look like they're toning off here a little bit. See if we got anything else out here across the globe. And South America looks like they definitely wants to adjust more. I notice if you look on the globe here on the side of it, you can see a lot more adjustment, unzipping here. We've seen this quite a bit in the South America region here over the last couple years. I think we had a deeper quake up here underneath Peru last year, and we followed a trail of events downward, and then we've seen another larger event more south of that the previous earthquake. So it looks like it's following that same trend. Here's all of the larger quake activity, but I'm noticing a trend of quakes southward now of that area. Not showing up here on the USGS map, but it might see some larger scale movement with that type of activity stirring up in an unzipping pattern here across the Peru-Chile Trench. Again, that's a major area of strain and a extremely lengthy subduction zone. So keep an eye there on the South America here with this migration of activity. Let's see what we got here across the Atlantic Ocean. Fairly quiet for now. Really nothing major going on. Out here in the Indian Ocean, fairly quiet as well. All right, so Storm Prediction Center. Looks like the severe weather risk is, across areas of the Central Plains around Kansas, Nebraska area. We've got a 2% and 5% chance here of tornado activity, so just a heads up in these regions today. That does include portions of Missouri, Kansas City, Missouri, in the 5% zone out there as well. Wind and hail threats exist as well. I want to look at these symbols real quick. The West Coast out here is going to bake. I'm sure you've seen a couple news articles out here showing that the users of Apple phones out here, in fact, mine shows it as well. I'm a proud Apple phone user. Is showing 120 degrees for a forecast high next weekend. And that's for 4th of July. Is it next weekend? Can't remember which date, but one of the days coming up next week shows 120. I don't think it's going to get that high. Either way, we are looking at dominant high pressure out here. Cooking the West Coast. It is going to be parked just offshore, so a lot of the heat is going to be ramping up here across California, Pacific Northwest as well. A little bit of dipping here in the jet stream, some cooler air coming down from the north. But that's not going to last long, it doesn't look like. So either way, variations in the patterns out here are good. Much better than just seeing a continuous high pressure dome out here across the West Coast. That would just not be good. Either way, we got some temperatures above 110 that we're going to have to deal with, folks. We'll catch you guys back out here a little bit later. Have a good day.